There is a smell that lives in certain garages. Old oil, rust, leather that has not been touched in decades. Dust that has settled on chrome and glass for so long it has become part of the surface. And somewhere in that mix, there is something else, something harder to name. It is the smell of forgotten time. A rusted frame sits under a tarp, and most people would see nothing but decay. They would see tetanus waiting to happen. They would see a headache, a money pit, a piece of junk that should have been crushed into a cube years ago. But you did not click on this video because you are most people. You saw something else. You saw possibility. You saw a story waiting to be told. And that is exactly what we need to talk about today. Why would anyone spend years of their life and thousands upon thousands of dollars on a machine that the rest of the world sees as scrap metal? What pulls a person into a cold garage at midnight, fingers numb, back aching, just to sand down a fender that nobody else will ever notice? What makes someone drive 300 miles to pick up a single carburetor part from a stranger they met on the internet? This is not just a question about cars. This is not about horsepower or vintage aesthetics or resale value. This is a question about something far deeper inside the human mind. This is about what we chase when we chase restoration. Let us start with what most people get wrong about this whole thing. They think restoring a car is about the car. It is not. The car is the excuse. The car is the stage, but the real performance is happening inside the mind of the restorer. Consider a case profile of someone we might call David. He is 52 years old. He works a desk job that pays the bills, but does not light any fire in his soul. His kids are grown and building their own lives. His marriage is stable but quiet. One Saturday afternoon, he drives past an old barn at the edge of town and sees a shape under a canvas cover. Something about the curve catches his eye. He pulls over. He walks through wet grass. He lifts the tarp. Underneath is a 1967 Mustang. The body is shot through with rust. The engine is seized solid. The interior has become home to generations of field mice. And yet, something happens in his chest. A tightness. An urgency that feels almost irrational. He has to have it. He offers the farmer cash on the spot. This is the moment where the real story begins, and it has almost nothing to do with transportation. What David is experiencing is a form of psychological anchoring. The human brain has a remarkable ability to attach meaning to objects, especially objects tied to emotional memory. That Mustang sitting in the barn is not just steel and glass and rubber. It is a bridge across time. It connects David to something he lost without even knowing he lost it. Maybe it is his father who drove a similar car and taught David how to change oil before he was 10 years old. Maybe it is his teenage years, when he had a summer job and saved every paycheck, dreaming of the car he would own someday. Maybe it is simply a version of himself that got buried under decades of routine and responsibility and playing it safe. The car becomes a vessel for something that cannot be said in words. It holds the weight of nostalgia and hope and identity all at once. And that is why David will spend the next 3 years of his life rebuilding it piece by piece, even when his wife questions his sanity, even when his friends shake their heads, even when his bank account says stop. Now things get more interesting. Restoration work demands a very specific kind of thinking. You cannot fake your way through it. You cannot bluff or charm or delegate your way to success. Every bolt has a purpose. Every wire follows a path that was engineered decades ago by people who are long gone. Every gasket must seal perfectly, or the whole system fails. This forces the restorer into a mental state that psychologists call metacognition. It is the act of thinking about your own thinking. It is the process of slowing down enough to notice how your mind is approaching a problem, checking your assumptions, questioning what you think you know. When David is tracing a wiring harness through the firewall, he is not just following colored lines. He is asking himself how he knows what he knows. He is testing his mental map against reality. He is forced to admit when he does not understand something, and that admission is the first step toward actual learning. This kind of mental discipline is rare in modern life. Most of our daily tasks reward speed and multitasking. We are trained to skim emails, to glance at dashboards, to make quick decisions and move on. The economy runs on efficiency. But the garage does not care about efficiency. A corroded connection does not care about your schedule. A misaligned panel will not hide itself just because you have somewhere to be. The car demands patience. It demands presence. And in demanding these things, it teaches a kind of focused attention that many people spend years in meditation retreats trying to achieve. The restorer gets this for free, though free is the wrong word when you consider the part's budget. There is another layer here that deserves close attention. Restoration is deeply tactile work. You feel the grit of rust flakes under your fingernails. You hear the precise click when a bolt finally threads into place after an hour of coaxing. You smell the solvents that cut through 50 years of grease. You feel the weight of a door panel as you lift it into position. This sensory immersion pulls the mind out of abstraction and plants it firmly in the physical world. The body and the brain synchronize around a task that is real and present. And for many restorers, this is the only place in their entire lives where they feel truly calm. Consider how most of our modern stress comes from things we cannot touch. Deadlines exist only on calendars. Relationship problems live in the space between what was said and what was meant. Anxieties about the future are projections into a time that does not exist yet. These problems have no physical form. You cannot grip them with your hands. You cannot hit them with a wrench. And because the brain evolved to solve concrete problems in the physical world, it struggles when forced to deal with abstractions all day long. It loops, it spirals. It keeps returning to the same worries because there is no clear action to take. But a seized brake caliper exists in the real world. You can see the corrosion. You can spray it with penetrating oil. You can apply heat and leverage and force, and eventually, with enough patience and profanity, you will free it. This is deeply satisfying to the human nervous system. It scratches an itch that office work cannot reach. Let us go deeper into what restoration reveals about the restorer themselves. There is a concept in psychology called trait introspection. It refers to the process of understanding your own patterns of thought and behavior through sustained attention over time. Most people never engage in this process in any meaningful way. They move through life reacting to external events without pausing to examine the machinery of their own minds. They know what they like and dislike, but not why. They have habits they cannot explain and reactions they have never questioned. But the restorer, whether they realize it or not, is forced into introspection by the nature of the work itself. Every decision in a restoration project mirrors a decision in life. Do you cut corners, or do you do it right even when no one is watching? Do you rush through the hard, boring parts, or do you take your time and let the process unfold? Do you accept imperfection because perfection is impossible? Or do you chase perfection anyway, even when it costs you sleep and money and peace? A narrative illustration makes this point vivid. Imagine a restorer named Maria who is rebuilding a 1955 Chevy Bel Air in her 2-car garage. She has been at it for 18 months. She reaches the point where she has to decide whether to repair a rusted floor pan or replace it entirely. Repairing would be faster and cheaper. She could weld in patches and seal the seams and move on. Replacing would mean tearing apart work she already finished. It would add weeks to the timeline and hundreds of dollars to the budget. She stands in her garage for an hour, just thinking, running her hand along the corroded metal. And in that hour, she learns something important about herself. She realizes she is the kind of person who cannot live with a hidden flaw. Even if no one else ever sees it, she will know. Every time she drives the car, she will know that beneath the carpet there is a compromise, and that knowledge would eat at her forever. So she tears it apart and starts again. This kind of self-knowledge is valuable beyond the garage walls. Maria carries that understanding into her career, where she now recognizes her own standard of excellence and stops apologizing for it. She carries it into her relationships, where she understands why certain shortcuts bother her more than they seem to bother others. She carries it into her own sense of identity. The car taught her something that no book and no seminar could teach. It showed her who she is when nobody is looking over her shoulder. Now we need to address the tension that restoration creates in a life, because it is not all peaceful satisfaction and Zen-like focus. There is frustration, there is doubt, there are long stretches of stagnation and moments of outright despair. A restorer can spend weeks tracking down a single part, calling shops across the country, scrolling through forums at 2 a.m, only to discover, when it finally arrives, that it does not fit. They can make a mistake that costs them months of progress, a slip of the grinder, a wrong measurement, paint that bubbles because the surface was not prepared correctly. They can run out of money and watch the project sit untouched for a year. They can run out of time as other responsibilities pile up. They can run out of faith that the car will ever be finished. This is the dark side of the obsession, and it mirrors the dark side of any meaningful pursuit in life. The relationship between a restorer and their project is complicated and messy. It is built on hope and sustained by sheer stubbornness. There are nights when the car seems like an enemy, an endless drain on resources and energy that gives nothing back. The restorer questions their sanity. Their spouse questions their sanity. They lie awake wondering if they should just sell the whole thing for scrap, get their garage back, get their weekends back, get their life back. But they do not sell. They keep going. And the reason they keep going reveals something important about humans, nature. We are not ultimately motivated by comfort. We are motivated by meaning. And meaning often comes wrapped in difficulty. The things that matter most are rarely easy. What happens inside the restorer during these hard moments is a kind of internal negotiation. The part of the mind that seeks safety and ease and predictability is at war with the part that seeks purpose and depth and accomplishment. The garage becomes an arena where this battle plays out night after night, weekend after weekend, year after year. And over time, if the restorer persists, they build something more valuable than a car. They build resilience. They build evidence that they can face an overwhelming task and not quit. That evidence becomes part of their identity. It changes how they see themselves in every other area of life. There is also a community dimension that deserves mention. Restorers rarely work in total isolation, even though the image of the lone mechanic in a quiet garage is romantic. They visit swap meets where dusty parts change hands, and decades of stories are exchanged between people who understand each other without needing much explanation. They join online forums where strangers share hard-won knowledge freely. posting detailed write-ups with photographs at 3 in the morning just to help someone they will never meet. They wave to other classic car owners on the highway, a simple gesture that carries more meaning than most people realize. It says, "I see you, and I know what you are doing, and I respect it." This creates a network of connection that many people desperately lack in their regular modern lives, where neighbors barely know each other and colleagues are competitors. The bonds formed over a shared love of vintage machinery can be surprisingly deep and lasting. They are built on mutual respect and a recognition that each person in the community is engaged in the same difficult, irrational, and deeply human pursuit of bringing something back from the dead. In a fragmented world, these connections matter more than we might admit. Now, we arrive at the final stage of a restoration project, and this stage carries its own unique and powerful psychology. Everything has been rebuilt. Every system has been tested twice, then tested again. The paint is perfect, so perfect that you are afraid to touch it with your bare hands. The chrome catches the garage light like a mirror reflecting hope. The interior smells like new leather, even though the car itself is decades old. The exhaust tips gleam. The glass is spotless. And now comes the moment that the restorer has been dreaming about for years, the single moment that justifies every skinned knuckle and every empty wallet, and every argument about whether this was worth it. The first start. The restorer climbs into the seat for the 1,000th time, but this time is different. The key slides into the ignition. Their hand trembles slightly. They close their eyes for just a second. Then they turn it. The engine cranks once, twice, sputters, catches, and then, if everything was done correctly, there is a sound that shakes the air and fills the chest and echoes off the garage walls. A roar, a heartbeat returning to a machine that the world had written off as nothing but scrap metal. The Syagichi. Emotion in this moment is hard to overstate. Many restorers cry, not from sadness, not from relief, but from a release of tension that has built up over years. The car is alive again, and in a strange way, so is something inside the restorer. They have proven something to themselves and to the world. They have taken disorder and created order. They have refused to accept that something broken is worthless. They have insisted, against all practicality and reason, that beauty and purpose can be reclaimed from rust and neglect. What does this tell us about the deep human need to restore things? Perhaps it is a response to a world that feels increasingly disposable and shallow. We throw away phones after 2 years because a new model came out. We discard furniture when it gets scratched rather than refinishing it. We upgrade and replace and move on without a second thought. Everything is designed to be consumed and forgotten. But the restorer rejects this entire way of being. They say that some things are worth saving. They say that history matters. They say that the effort required to bring something back is part of the value itself, not a barrier to the value. There is also a quiet confrontation with mortality woven through every hour of restoration work. Classic cars remind us that time passes whether we want it to or not. They were new once, fresh off the factory line, gleaming under showroom lights. They were bought by people who are now memories, photographs in albums that nobody opens anymore. They were driven on roads that have been repaved a dozen times since then. Children were born in the back seats. Families took vacations. Couples fell in love. And yet, here the cars are, still capable of motion and life if someone cares enough to bring them back. The restorer is engaged in a kind of rescue mission across the decades. They are preserving a physical link to a past that would otherwise crumble into nothing but rust and forgotten stories. And in doing so, whether they consciously realize it or not, they are grappling with their own place in the flow of history. They are asking, in their own wordless way, what will remain when they too are gone? What will they leave behind that matters? The psychology of classic car restoration is ultimately about depth. It is about refusing to skim the surface of existence. It is about choosing to engage with difficulty instead of running from it. It is about building something tangible with your own hands that represents who you are and what you value. In a world that often rewards speed and superficiality, the restorer chooses slowness and substance. They choose the long road. They choose to honor the past by pulling it into the present. And perhaps this is the real lesson that extends far beyond any garage or any single car. We all have something rusted sitting under a tarp somewhere in our lives. A dream we abandoned when it got hard. A skill we stopped practicing when we got busy with things that felt more urgent. A relationship we let corrode through neglect and silence and fear of vulnerability. A version of ourselves that we gave up on because the work seemed too much. The restorer stands as a living reminder that it is not too late, that decay is not destiny, that with patience and persistence and a willingness to get our hands dirty, we can bring things back from the brink. We can strip away what has corroded and find solid metal underneath. We can make them run again. We can hear the engine roar. If you have a restoration story of your own, share it in the comments below. This community is built on shared passion and mutual encouragement, and every project carries a lesson worth hearing. If this exploration resonated with something in you, consider subscribing for more content that goes beneath the surface. Depth is its own quiet kind of light. Thanks for watching. The garage is always waiting, and so is whatever you have been putting off for too long.